When grief becomes your compass, have you ever wondered what happens when the life you planned suddenly shatters? When grief arrives uninvited and refuses to leave? Most of us are taught that grief is something to overcome, to push past, to get over. But what if I told you that grief isn't just an obstacle on your path? It might actually be the compass that guides you to your true destination. I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Tareeah Garrett, a woman whose relationship with grief has fundamentally changed how I view life's most painful moments. Tareeah isn't just remarkable, she's revolutionary in how she's transformed personal pain into purpose. Her journey from the medical field to owning a food truck in just 2 months exemplifies how grief, when embraced rather than avoided, can become the catalyst for extraordinary transformation. In a world desperate for authentic guides through our darkest moments, Tareeah stands as a beacon, illuminating paths forward that most of us never knew existed. The conversation with Taria revealed something powerful. Grief doesn't have to halt your progress. In fact, it can become the very force that propels you forward when you stop seeing it as something separate from your journey and start recognizing it as an integral part of your path. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how society teaches us to compartmentalize grief? We're told to take bereavement leave, to step away, to heal first, and then return to our lives, as if grief is some kind of contagious disease that might infect our productivity if we don't quarantine it properly. It's almost comical, isn't it? The way we're expected to schedule our heartbreak into convenient 2 week blocks before returning to normal. But what Taria's story illuminates is that sometimes the healing happens precisely because we continue moving forward with our purpose, not despite our grief, but alongside it. This isn't about toxic positivity or denying pain. It's about something much more nuanced and powerful. It's about understanding that grief and growth aren't mutually exclusive, they're often intimately connected. Consider the story of Tara Bayman, who transformed her grief over career dissatisfaction into a thriving online business coaching practice. Despite having no formal business background, she faced the emotional weight of leaving her established career path. For years, she experienced what many would call career grief, mourning the time invested in a path that no longer served her purpose. But here's where it gets interesting. Rather than allowing that grief to paralyze her, Tara embraced the transition period as an opportunity. She didn't wait until the grief subsided to begin building something new. She built something new while processing her grief. By May 2025, she had established herself as a respected online business coach with a significant following, helping others navigate similar transitions. Her grief didn't disappear, it transformed. It became the foundation upon which she built a new identity, a new purpose. The very thing that could have stopped her became the thing that defined her new direction. This reminds me of the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the cracks part of the design rather than something to hide. The breaks become the most beautiful part of the piece. What if we approach grief the same way? Not as something to hide or overcome, but as the gold that makes our story uniquely valuable. Then there's Tara Murray, whose story reveals another dimension of grief, the grief that comes from the limiting beliefs. For years, Tara believed she wasn't smart enough to run her own business. She grieved the opportunity she had missed due to this self imposed limitation. When faced with a pivotal moment, Tora made a choice that would alter the trajectory of her life. She chose courage over comfort, embracing the grief of her past limitations while refusing to let them define her future. Despite having no formal business background, she established a successful facial sculpting business. By April 2025, her business was featured in prominent social media profiles and business spotlights. Her journey now serves as inspiration for others who are grieving their own limiting beliefs and fear taking the next step in their mission. What's remarkable about Tara's story isn't just that she succeeded despite her doubts, it's that she succeeded because she was willing to face the grief of what could have been, what should have been, what might have been, and then move forward anyway. This brings me to something Tareeah emphasized in our conversation: purpose, persistence, staying committed to your mission, especially during painful periods, provides structure and meaning that helps navigate the grieving process. Your purpose becomes the lighthouse that guides you through the storm of grief. Consider Captain Tara Ernest, who transformed her grief over lack of representation in aviation into a mission to make the industry more inclusive. As a Black woman in aviation, Tara faced numerous obstacles and experienced grief over the lack of diversity in her field. Rather than allowing this grief to ground her ambitions, she channeled it into furthering her education and creating pathways for others. She became a commercial airline captain and MBA candidate dedicated to making aviation more inclusive, accessible, and inspiring for the next generation. As an Embry-Riddle graduate, Tara witnessed firsthand the barriers that underrepresented groups face in aviation. By May 2025, she had not only achieved her personal goal of becoming a captain, but was also recognized as a panelist and speaker on aviation inclusion. Her work is actively changing the landscape of aviation, ensuring that future generations won't have to experience the same grief over lack of representation. The grief she experienced became the fuel for systemic change. These stories illuminate something profound about grief that we rarely discuss. Grief isn't just about loss, it's about transformation. It's about taking what has been broken and creating something new, something that couldn't have existed without that breaking. In my conversation with Tareeah, she emphasized that faith serves as a foundation during these difficult transitions. Maintaining spiritual connection during difficult times provides the strength needed to persevere when giving up seems like the only option. There's a scripture that resonates deeply with this idea. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. This passage speaks to the resilience that faith can provide when grief threatens to overwhelm us, but faith doesn't mean waiting for divine intervention while doing nothing. It means trusting that your actions, even small ones, matter, that moving forward, even when you can't see the entire path, is an act of faith itself. This brings me to something I find particularly powerful about Tareeah's journey: her transition from the medical field to owning a food truck in just 2 months. Think about that timeline for a moment. 2 months. Most people take longer to decide what color to paint their living room. What this illustrates is that grief doesn't have to slow us down. Sometimes it speeds us up. It clarifies what matters. It burns away the non essential and leaves us with crystal clarity about what we truly want. In a world where talented Black women are often handed pink slips while underperforming men receive golden parachutes, stories like Tareeah's, Tara Bayman's, Tara Murray's, and Captain Tara Ernest remind us of what's possible when we refuse to be defined by society's limitations or our own grief. These women didn't succeed despite being Black women navigating grief. They succeeded because their experiences as Black women navigating grief gave them unique perspectives, resilience, and determination that became their superpowers. Here's an affirmation that emerged from my conversation with Tareeah that I want to share with you. My grief does not define my limits, it expands my capacity for growth, compassion, and purpose. Say that with me. My grief does not define my limits, it expands my capacity for growth, compassion, and purpose. This isn't about toxic positivity or denying the reality of pain. It's about recognizing that grief changes us. And sometimes that change is exactly what we need to become who we're meant to be. So, where do we go from here? How do we transform this insight into action? I challenge you today to look at the grief you carry, not as a burden to be shed, but as a compass pointing toward your most authentic life. That pain you feel, it's not just heartbreak, it's clarity. It's your soul's way of saying, this matters deeply to me. What if instead of running from that pain, you followed it? What if you asked your grief, what are you trying to show me? Where are you trying to lead me? Today, identify one mission or calling you've been hesitant to pursue because of grief, fear, or pain. Take one concrete step toward that mission before the sun sets. Whether it's researching a business idea, making one phone call, or simply writing down your vision, take that step while acknowledging your grief rather than being paralyzed by it. Remember, the most powerful journeys often begin with the most painful steps. Your grief isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of your most authentic chapter. It's not just about what you've lost, but about what you might find if you keep moving forward. As Maya Angelou wisely said, you may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter the defeats so you can know who you are, what you can rise from, how you can still come out of it. The world doesn't need more people who have never suffered. It needs people who have suffered and found meaning in it, who have been broken and rebuilt themselves with gold in the cracks. It needs people who can transform their personal grief into collective healing, their individual pain into universal purpose. So I leave you with this. When grief arrives in your life, and it will, don't just survive it, transform it. Let it transform you. Let it guide you to places you never knew existed, to strengths you never knew you had, to a life that honors both what you've lost and what you've found. Because when grief becomes your compass rather than your cage, you don't just find a new direction, you become a new kind of navigator for others who are lost in their own storms. And in that becoming, you discover that the most beautiful journeys often begin with the most painful steps.